I recently got the chance to stay at the Inn at 500, located in the heart of downtown Boise. With complimentary drinks at check-in and spacious luxe penthouses and suites, it's an ideal spot for celebrations and your visitors. It was the perfect place for me and my husband to sneak away for a little staycation. We loved the cozy fireplace in our room and the balcony with gorgeous views of the city skyline, where we shared coffee in the morning. Ready to plan an unforgettable Boise stay? Book now at innat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise, we all know Californians have been moving to Idaho in droves, but why? We're digging into what's really drawing them here and exploring the impact it's had on our community. And is the trend finally slowing down? It's Monday, October 28th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is Micheline Cromwell, a local realtor who is resort and second home certified and a luxury home specialist. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So a near constant topic of conversation in the Treasure Valley is Californians moving to Idaho. Why do you think Californians moving here has become such a focal point for long-term Idaho residents?
Well, first and foremost, it has to do with the potential, I think, for cultural and political shifts. Idaho has traditionally been known for its conservative values, and many locals fear that the influx of Californians brings conflicting political ideologies and also different cultural norms. And then also, I think it has to do with the rising housing prices. As a real estate agent, that's something that I'm very aware of. From 2020 to current day, the median home price in the Boise metropolitan area has increased by over 50%. And this is largely driven by out-of-state buyers with higher budgets from equity-rich markets like California. And local salaries haven't kept pace, and this seems to be creating a significant affordability crisis. First-time homebuyers and middle-income families who've lived in Idaho for generations are finding themselves priced out of the market. I think it also has to do, lastly, with increased traffic. I think the impact on Idaho roads have been really significant, and it's really frustrating to a lot of people.
Yeah. There are, like you said, there are some very tangible ways that life has shifted in this area in the past 10 years, but especially in the past 4 or 5 years. And I mean, to be fair, 70,000 Californians have moved to Idaho since 2020. That's a significant number, and that is going to have impacts on housing, on Idaho culture and norms and our roads. That's just, with that large of a number, that is to be expected a little bit.
Absolutely.
But what do you think it is about Californians in particular? Because quite a few people have moved to Idaho since the start of the pandemic, and they've come from Washington and Texas and Utah. But nobody ever says, like, these darn Texans moving to Idaho. It's always the Californians. So why, what is it about Californians that people just feel so strongly about here?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that California transplants often arrive with significantly more purchasing power than people from Texas and people from Washington do. And they come with more purchasing power because they are coming with higher home equity from California's expensive real estate market. And then they often have significantly higher salaries from California-based remote work. And I think this economic disparity creates more visible, market disruption than migrants from other states do. And then I think it also has to do a little bit with just, I would say, a visibility factor, if you will. I think Californians tend to be more noticeable for little things that they kind of forget about. Like, I think that for some reason, they leave their license plates on longer. I think they often tend to congregate in specific neighborhoods or developments. Californians often seem to stand out a little bit in their mannerisms and the way they dress. So they're maybe just more visible. And then probably the last thing I can think of is just the media attention. I used to work in TV. I was an anchor for Fox, and so I think I have an interesting perspective on this. But the media on the whole tends to focus on the California to Idaho narrative. And I think they do this because it fits into a larger national conversation about Californians leaving their state. And I think the contrast makes for more compelling storytelling, makes for better news. So it's brought up again and again.
And I definitely want to get into that because what is it about Idaho that is so appealing to people from California? Why are they telling you that they're moving to Idaho?
I think it has to do with, almost this romanticized version of the West. I think they see Idaho as this untouched landscape. I think they think of it as just being a slower pace of life, a return to simplicity. I think they think of, just that there's a limited population density. And so there's going to be lots of room for me to be able to make and build a beautiful home for my family.
And Micheline, a lot of times when we talk about Californians, we treat them as if they're this singular, homogenous group who, I mean, maybe all moved from LA, who all have the same reason for moving to Idaho. Is there some accuracy in that? Or are you seeing quite a variety in reasons why people are moving here?
Oh, I think I do see a variety. I think that there's people that move here for the outdoor recreation. I think that people move here for the beautiful wilderness, right? That they're excited to get out into. I think that Idaho has a reputation for strong property rights and personal freedom, and that seems to be really appealing to Californians who feel constrained by their state's regulations and crowded conditions. Ironically, Lindsay, though, the very isolation that has preserved Idaho's appeal is now, I think, being somewhat challenged by the influx of newcomers that are attracted to it. And so this really does seem to be creating a complex dynamic where new residents are drawn to Idaho's unchanged character while also potentially contributing to this transformation that we're seeing today.
Yeah, kind of they wanted to move here. They're like, "Oh, it's kind of like this untouched, rural area." But then when you have 70,000 people move to an area, that changes the dynamic. Like that's part of why it changes.
Exactly.
Well, and I think it's really interesting kind of this backlash against Californians moving here and how, they aren't a homogenous group. I know just from my own interactions with people who have moved to Idaho from California, often they're more conservative or, Idaho is a conservative state, but they're more right or conservative. I know those terms can be really loosey-goosey now, but more conservative than people who've lived in Idaho their whole lives. Like, the fifth generation Idahoans are a type of conservative, but that people coming from California are very conservative a lot of the time. I know that's not all of them, but that's something that I think is so interesting about when people are like, oh, these Californians. I'm like, they're quite conservative often.
Exactly. I have an example of that. Actually, I had this sweet couple. They were just the sweetest people. But he came into our very first appointment and he had a very large firearm attached right on his hip. And it scared me just a little bit. And his explanation of why he was doing that was so interesting. He was like, oh, I was just trying to fit in. I didn't want you to think I was one of those Californians. I was trying to show you that I can be an Idahoan, at least the Idahoan he thought that are around.
Yeah, no, I think that is the most quintessential Californians are moving to Idaho story I've ever heard. That feels like what a lot of the interactions are like. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey Boise, as we head into November, the season of gratitude, it's easy to focus on giving thanks to others, our coworkers, neighbors, friends, and family. But how often do we stop to express gratitude for ourselves? Taking care of you is one of the best ways to show up for those you love, and therapy is a powerful tool to help you learn to do that. This is where BetterHelp comes in. With BetterHelp, you get connected with a licensed therapist for an online appointment that's convenient and flexible, so it fits in your busy holiday schedule. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Whether you're working on self-acceptance, managing stress, or finding new ways to appreciate yourself for who you are, therapy can help. So this month, let's learn to be thankful for ourselves too. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Have you ever heard reasons why people were moving here and maybe their perception of what Idaho is versus how they picture it in their mind was wildly different?
Oh, yes. I can't tell you how many times I heard over and over again, especially right at the beginning of COVID, that people wanted to come in. They wanted 5 acres of land. They wanted no HOA so they could have chickens on their property. They wanted a 5,000 square foot home with all the bells and whistles. And they wanted all of that within a 5-minute driving distance of Target. If you think that was just one person, it wasn't. It was literally dozens of people that I spoke with that had those same 4 or 5 requirements. So
Wow.
it was a little bit of an educational experience for me to say, oh, okay, so 5 acres is pretty rare unless you want to go into one of our sweet tiny farming communities, and no, Target is not close to that at all.
No,
So
no.
yes,
Target's, it's on Eagle Road or by the mall. So really
right.
in the heart of everything.
There's no empty 5 acres for you. I'm so sorry.
In your work, have you seen any difference in the demographics of Californians who are moving here, maybe pre-pandemic versus early pandemic times versus Californians moving here more recently?
Yes, I have. I think the profile of California transplants to Idaho has undergone a notable transformation from 2019, 2020 to today. In the early days of the pandemic, Idaho saw an influx of young families, and they were these sweet young families, almost all of them seeking refuge from strict COVID-19 protocols, particularly mask mandates and school closures. And these newcomers were often remote workers or entrepreneurs, and they were just attracted in general to Idaho's more relaxed restrictions and the family-friendly conservative atmosphere that Idaho often promotes. But now, as we are moving into 2024, 2025, I think the demographic has shifted significantly. I think the trend shows more retirement age Californians making that move. And that group of people are often grandparents, and they are following their adult children and grandchildren who relocated during that initial wave.
Interesting. So maybe their children moved in the early pandemic and now the rest of the family is coming to Idaho.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's been any change in long-term Idahoans' perceptions or attitudes towards Californians?
Oh, I wish I could say that it was getting better, but I don't know if I've really seen that personally. I feel like I have, sometimes when I list a home, I'll get neighbors that will come over to me and say, "You're not going to sell this to a Californian, are you?" Which I find so sad, right?
Wow.
Because I feel like we all need to be a little bit more open-minded. I think sometimes when you think of the people coming in from out of state, I think if we see them more as refugees, if you will. I think perhaps our perception of them would be kinder, a little softer. Sometimes I have had people that have asked me, what can I do as a Californian to fit in more? And usually I try to mention things like, as kind as we need to be as Idahoans, we are expecting you to be kind about the differences between California and Idaho. So yes, we will not have the same number of restaurants that you had in California. We are not going to have as many direct flights from Boise Airport that you did from LA. And perhaps instead of lamenting and being frustrated with those, I usually just try to remind people as they're coming in to see the good, right? To look around and remember why it is that you chose to move to Idaho in the first place. There really is less traffic. There's still a lower cost of living than where you're coming from. You have a closer connection to nature, a stronger sense of community. And so, yeah, I guess just in general, just if you find yourself saying, in California, we had blank, blank, blank too often, it might be time to reflect on your decision and maybe adjust your expectations accordingly.
And Micheline, there's been a drop in the rate of Californians moving to Idaho since the early pandemic days. Why do you think that decrease is happening?
Yes, we actually had a renowned economist from Harvard come into our last Idaho real estate conference that happened just a couple of weeks ago. And he shared that there really does seem to be a shift from Californians moving to Idaho. And instead, they are choosing to find refuge in Montana and in Wyoming. So we have seen a decrease in Californians coming in. Do I think Californians will ever stop coming? No, I don't. I think that there will always be people from California moving to Idaho.
So, with the downward trend of Californians moving to Idaho, have you seen a rise in people from other states besides California who are moving to Idaho?
Yes, I have a little bit. I mean, we've mentioned Texas, right? And we've mentioned Washington. The other states that we see people coming from are Utah, Arizona, and also Oregon. We actually see quite a bit of Oregons coming in as well.
So, Micheline, really quick before you go, what would you say that Californians should consider before deciding to move to Idaho?
Probably top of my list is knowing that there are 4 distinct seasons. So winter happens in Idaho, and to probably be prepared for that, which includes maybe getting a vehicle that is good in snow, and maybe making sure that, I don't know, that you buy and get the appropriate clothing for when winter does happen. I would just say as well, just come and remember and see all the good that Idaho has to offer. All of our outdoor recreational opportunities like fishing and hiking and skiing. The little things like looking at the night sky and being able to visibly see stars, getting to know your neighbors and taking advantage of community connections that we really do have a lot of opportunities for here. And just perhaps reminding people that this is a little bit of a slower pace of life, and we take great joy in finding the beauty in simple pleasures, and that we hope that everyone that moves here does as well.
Thank you so much, Micheline. Thank you for sharing your insights and your perspective on this really hot button topic in Idaho.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, we would love it if you would tell a friend about us. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the second part of this series, Why Are Idahoans Leaving the State? You won't want to miss it.